Welcome to the Brian Nhira podcast. My name is Brian Nhira and I am your host. Today I am going to be talking about a very juicy topic. Record deal versus independent artist. Now, years ago, you could not be an artist in the music industry without having a record deal because there were many gatekeepers before the advent of the internet, the advent of streaming DSPs outside of iTunes. It was very hard to break through. It was very hard, near impossible to break through without the help of a record label to help fund you, to help place you, to help make sure that you're seen, period. But then along came social media, along came the internet, and along came avenues for artists who did not have a record deal to get their shine. And so we are currently living in a space in the music industry where, you can be a very successful artist without having the backing of a record label. You can be very successful funding your own projects, promoting your own projects, marketing your own projects, making your own music videos, putting them up on the internet because of platforms like YouTube, to the point where we're honestly asking the question nowadays, do we actually need record labels? Do we actually need them? Now, I have friends who have record deals. Obviously, on this podcast, I have been an independent artist for the last 10 years, and it has its pros and cons. And from the friends who I've had conversations with, and even my own analysis of the music industry and whether record deals and the way that they're being structured today, I go back and forth on whether they're actually beneficial this day. Okay. In this day and age. So today I just want to kind of go through, I want to analyze a little bit, not do a super deep dive on that, but I kind of want to briefly analyze the pros and cons, and then just kind of, draw a few conclusions. And these are all my own opinions. If they're not your opinions, that is okay. Okay. So, let's start with the record deal. What does a record deal look like nowadays? There's kind of 3 different deals that people are signing nowadays, okay? And so these different deals include the 360 deal, which is a very prevalent deal. And the reason why it's a very prevalent deal, I'll explain what it is. Let me explain what it is first, and then I'll talk about why it's a prevalent deal. So the 360 deal is an exclusive recording artist contract that entitles a record label to a percentage of the earnings, a very large percentage, sometimes 60%, a very large percent of all of the artist's revenue streams. So rather than just the recorded music sales, which doesn't make sense because it's a record contract, but they start dipping into revenue streams that include publishing royalties, live concert revenue. So when you tour, they get a percentage of that. Merchandise sales, endorsement deals, book and movie deals, ringtones, and more. So that's a 360 deal. A lot of people will actually call this a death deal because it is essentially making the artist an employee of the record company who gets a very small percentage of what's brought back. Now, some people will say, well, I'd rather have a small piece of a big pie than a whole pie that's small. And that is, hey, I hear you. More power to you in that area. Okay? And the reason why this deal became a prevalent deal in the music industry is because the revenue streams of the music industry have changed significantly over the last 2 to 3 decades. It used to be that record companies used to make a lot of money off of the master recordings because the master recordings would go out to radio. Radio would do well. Everybody listened to the radio. But now we have streaming, and streaming doesn't pay nearly as much. And then physical sales of CDs was huge 2 to 3 decades ago. Now you very, 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 very rarely see artists printing CDs. Why? Because people don't buy them anymore. People don't even have CD players in their cars anymore. People don't have CD players on their laptops anymore, right? So they've kind of become obsolete. Those were two very significant income streams for the record labels. So now the record labels have to supplement their investments. So what they're saying now is that we're going to do a 360 deal where I don't just get the music money, I get the touring money, I get the publishing money, and I get book and movie deal money. Okay, so that's a 360 deal. The next kind of recording deal is a distribution deal. Distribution deals allow the owner of the recording, so the artist, so essentially the artist puts up the money to record the song, right? The track, the record, the album, whatever it is. And they retain their copyrights, but get access to the knowledge, the systems, and the reach of a distributor. Okay? So the owner of the tracks, the artist, provides the finished tracks, and the distributor manages the process of getting them to retail and to digital streaming platforms. I actually think that this is a great model. I think distribution deals are phenomenal. People like Macklemore have had distribution deals. I think Chance the Rapper has had a distribution deal. I'm not quite sure. Don't quote me on that. But this is actually not a bad deal at all. Okay. And then the next one is the single song deal. This is what quite a few people, especially if people blow up on TikTok, they have a song that blows up. They'll sign a single song deal with a record label where it's essentially an agreement, a contract used by an independent record company to enter into a contractual agreement with an individual, group, or band for one song, to record one song, or for a song that presently exists to release for public sale or use. Okay, so those are the 3 different deals that you see oftentimes in record deal land. Okay, and so what are the pros? What are the pros of a let me do this. Instead of going to the pros, I'll come back to the pros after I kind of explain like what being an independent artist looks like, okay? So it's pretty self-explanatory what an independent artist is. It's paying for your own records, promoting your own records, building your own audience, paying for your own content creation. Essentially, you're the boss of everything. Okay, and you have a team of people who you assemble together to ultimately help you do what a record label will do for you. Okay, that's pretty simple, right? That's what an independent artist is. That's what my life has looked like as an artist. It's looked like assembling my own teams, creating my own content. We do a lot of our stuff in 2020. We started doing a lot of our stuff in-house. So, where my brother would film, my sister would light, I would do editing, my sister would do editing. Before that, I had videographers and other people who are on my roster who would help me do stuff. I procure on my own producers, and I pay for them myself. Ultimately, we'll set up agreements between the producers to be able to, make the records happen. We have different deals that we'll do with different producers. And so that's the life of an independent artist. You run the ship, you don't rely on a label to do that stuff for you. You do it all yourself. And by the grace of God, the industry lately has lent itself to the independent artist. Also, you have a distributor. So I use TuneCore as my distributor. They've been amazing for me over the last 10 years. They really helped me out a lot. But there's other digital service distributors such as DistroKid and CD Baby. I'm sure there's a few more, but those are the main ones that we have. Okay, so now let me get back into like the pros and cons. So I think if we're looking at a record deal, the pros of a record deal, based upon everything that I've researched, and even the conversations that I've had with some friends who have record deals who do very well, is that, the beauty of it is that you have the weight of a professional team behind you. So you have the weight of a marketing team, you have the weight of a content creation team, you have the weight of an executive team, you have the weight of office full of people who are helping you get your job done. Right? So what essentially what you're able to do is as a signed artist is you're able to focus on the music, which is actually a very big blessing. And so sometimes it's worth it to sign a record deal. It's like if you don't want to do all of the hard things like that come with being an artist, and you'd rather have a team of people. Ultimately, as an independent artist, you create a team. But if you don't want to do that stuff, a record label is a very good option for you. Okay. Another pro is they're advocating for you and have relationships to allow you to grow at a faster rate. That's just the truth. Okay. The next pro about a record deal is exposure opportunities are often more readily available to you because it's based upon a lot of those relationships that they have. They have relationships with playlist editors at Spotify, at Apple Music, and all these different things. But it's not impossible as an independent artist to gain those things. Okay, so what are the pros of being an independent artist? Number one, you get to be the captain of the ship, and you get to drive your own creative vision. Which is very, very, very important in my opinion. The second thing is this, like you own your stuff. You get to go through the process of building an audience that truly loves your art and hasn't been bought. It's just the truth. As an independent artist, the audience is the judge, the jury, and the executor. If they don't like your stuff, they just won't listen to it. And that's hard. That's hard to realize sometimes. There's been stuff that I've loved that people didn't really like that much. And that's okay. That is okay. Okay. The next thing is you get to decide when you want to release something. It's not something that you get as an independent artist as a signed artist, unless you build yourself up to that place. And the last thing is this, it's so fulfilling when people begin to respond when you are creating simply because it's really great art and hasn't been shoved in their faces through marketing schemes. Okay. Now let me go through real quick as I end this podcast about record deals versus independent artistry. The cons of having a record deal: you are limited in the ownership of your creative vision. That's just the fact of the matter. Is they want what generates income because it is a business and they are businessmen and women. Okay. The next thing is this: the next con of having a record deal is this: you're bound to the timeline of a company rather than to your own. The next thing is you're often giving up the rights to be able to own your masters, your publishing, etc. And we've all seen the story of Taylor Swift and her battle to get her masters back, to the point where she was just like, all right, fine, I'm just going to re-record and re-release all of these things so I can get the masters back. Right? Her masters were actually sold to like her arch enemy, Scooter Braun. So that can happen as an independent artist. You don't own your stuff. It can be sold to anybody. And the last con that I've identified is whenever they are done with you or decide you're no longer beneficial to them, you will be dropped. You will be dropped because you are a business entity to them. And whenever you as a business entity are no longer beneficial to them, then they have no use for you anymore. And that's hard to hear, but it's the truth. All right, the cons of being an independent artist is honest. It's hard. It's really, really, really hard. The journey is not easy. The work that you have to put in is not easy. The sleepless nights is not easy. Having to procure your own content, having to pay for it all, having to put everything together, not having the benefit of someone just telling you who's coming to do this for you, it's hard. It's really, really, really hard. Okay? The second con is this: oftentimes finances will be limited. So you got to get creative with how you accomplish projects. You know what I'm saying? The next thing is this: you have to be the one to build relationships with people who can advance your career. That's just something that you have to do, and it's not always easy to do that. And the last thing is this: you have to wear many hats. Okay? You have to be the person to make sure that your business finances are straight, that your taxes and stuff are straight, so you're not having to pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in taxes when you don't really have that money because you've just been spending all your money, right? You got to make sure you're keeping track of all your write-ups and all those other things that or write-offs, excuse me. All those other things. You got to make sure that you're staying on top of social media. You got to make sure you're staying on top of all of the production, all of those things. It is not easy at all. Okay, so I personally have loved being an independent artist. I have a great team who surrounds me. I think that being an independent artist in this current climate and atmosphere is the way to go. It takes longer. It's going to take longer to build, but I promise you, when people start responding and when your business avenues and streams start flowing, it's a good life. It's a real good life. So you make your own decision on that. Record deal or independent artistry. Thank you so much for taking time to listen to this episode of the Brian Nhira podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you like to listen or watch on.